the first part of the book has really stayed true to my vision, and I haven't really made that many changes of it. I think it sets things up really nicely for the type of story that it is. And basically, if you haven't read the blurb yet, it's about a woman looking for chocolate love and an international art thief in all the wrong places. So chocolate is clearly a strong motif, but one of the things that happened in one of the later rewrites is it's a story that I knew about for quite some time, but I don't know how it was in the back of my mind, and then I just realized a way that I was able to bring it into my story, and that was a heist that took place at the Royal Ontario Museum in the 1980s, and it was an opal heist, and it was never solved. It's a really interesting story. I think it would be a great opportunity for some journalistic writer to go back and search that story, but I've used it to inspire my story, so inspired by true events, really, kind of thing. But I brought the story into a 21st century setting and into the escapades of a reluctant amateur sleuth by the name of Kalina Boyko. And do I have anything else to say about that? So it starts off at the very beginning, and as I said, it sort of sets everything up. I workshopped this particular passage when I was at the Humber School of Writing summer workshop, and I somehow worked up the courage to actually do a reading in front of I can't remember how many students it was, but it was a huge auditorium, and the reaction to the reading was another thing that really inspired me to keep going with the work. Hello, everybody at the back.
If you're getting crowded by the door, there's a little more.
Yeah, please feel free to move in.
The next people coming in, you might find yourself packing in there pretty tight.
Yeah, like, oh, here's see, we've got some raw presents now, and there's some drinking chocolate back here too. So, yeah, I know. Oh, okay. So I'll let people get settled, and if you want to rustle around a little bit before I actually start the reading. Sure. Okay, so maybe I am a diva. And let me just quench my thirst here before I get started too, so I'm not coughing through this. So this first, I didn't give my chapters titles, but for the reading purposes, I would call this the chocolate burp. I scrambled beneath the humbling granite archway that framed the Canadian National Museum staff entrance, water dripping from me as if I'd just slipped out of the shower. The quivers that waved through my body triggered an uncomfortable realization, not that I was cold from my drenched state, but that I'd transitioned into the first stage of chocolate detox. I hadn't had a crumble of the substance for at least 18 hours. The tinted glass of the door before me mirrored a startling reflection. Harrowing would have been a kind descriptor. The morning had started as a good hair day, but the flash flood rains that had caught me sans umbrella put a different spin on the dew. So not fair. Why was it that Audrey Hepburn looked positively radiant after being soaked in a torrential downpour in Breakfast at Tiffany's? I looked like breakfast at Walmart. Mind you, I didn't resemble Audrey Hepburn at the best of times, except perhaps for the dark, doe-like eyes I shared with the Hollywood icon. I tilted closer towards the glass, raised my index fingers to the corners of my eyes, and elongated the fragile skin upwards, planing out the subtle crow's feet. Maybe I did have a bit of Hepburn going on. The image grimaced back at me. Who was I kidding? The Hepburn I was channeling was Catherine when she was fished out of the Ulanga River in African Queen. Are you going inside, or are you planning on staring at yourself all day? Embarrassed that my self-deprecation had been interpreted as vanity, I rotated towards the person with the after-hours club voice. The young woman I faced sliced away any traces of my self-esteem in a nanosecond, bulldozed past me, and vanished behind the second set of doors. I mustered a handful of dignity, only to lose it after slipping and lurching on the stone floor opposite the security control room. Through the triple-glazed bulletproof glass, there was a beehive of activity. Security Command Central was crammed full of people, and I discerned guards who didn't usually work the morning swing. News must have broken over the weekend, but I had eyeballed all the dailies before stepping onto the subway, the Globe, the Post, the Star, and even skimmed the Free Metro paper, but none referred to the disappearance of the porcelain Tong horse from the Chinese gallery the previous Friday. One more set of doors steered me to the main security checkpoint, where a boyish newbie guard was planted behind the counter of black polished laminate. I instantly dove into his eyes. Emerald green pools like that are a rarity. The combination of those eyes with his dirty blonde faux bed head was an irresistible combination. His neck was a tad thick, but I suspected there was a bodybuilder's frame hidden beneath the uniform. Good morning. I hoped my voice would drown out the sound of my heart palpitating. Good morning, ma'am. Looks like you forgot your umbrella today. Ma'am? Seriously? Clearly my cougarishly tight skirt wasn't fooling anyone. You can call me Kalina, and I suggest you drop the word ma'am from your vocabulary, at least around here. I was doing him a favor. He could lose his head if he used that term on one of our resident feminazis. Noted. My name's Marco Zeffirelli. Like the director, Franco Zeffirelli's screen version of Romeo and Juliet was my all-time favorite version of the story of the star-crossed lovers. I thought the director's name was Carson James. Never mind. Eyes you could lose yourself in? Yes. Knowledge of Italian film directors? No. I plunked my purse down and rummaged for my ID badge. No point asking a keener if he'd swipe me through. What's going on in the control room? I scrounged deeper into my bag with the fervor of a manic dog trying to surface a buried bone. They caught the guy that stole that horse. Are you kidding? So far, I'd found a bottle of dark plum nail polish and some rogue shavings of chocolate in my bag. I licked my fingers. Oh, I wouldn't kid about a thing like that. It's only my third day on the job. So who was it? One of the contract construction workers. Have you found that ID yet, ma'am? I mean, Kalina. How did they catch the guy? Seems he was a suspect in the theft of that small group of 7 painting from the art gallery a couple of months ago. They've been keeping an eye on him. The perp's a total amateur. Why do you say that? International art thieves go for big-ticket items, like that opal collection that went missing from here. That was almost 30 years ago. My eyebrows arched into an unnatural point. Was this kid even born when the gems went missing from the Canadian National Museum? You seem to know a lot for someone who's been on the job for only 3 days. Personal interest of mine, art theft that is. The crime's second only to drug trafficking. About $6 billion worth of art is stolen every year. Who knew? I spied the woman who'd almost bowled me over moments earlier as she whizzed through the corridor bordering the rear of the security desk. By the way, do you know the woman that came through here just before me? The one who's a lead singer for a death metal band? I tried to suppress a chortle but failed. I think you profiled that one pretty accurately. It's not a profile. I saw her front a band a couple of months ago. She's the new IT help desk person. Still has her temp badge. Doesn't really have customer service written all over her, if you ask me. Finally, my fingers landed on a familiar plastic shape. I whipped my hand out of the bowels of my purse as though withdrawing it from an alien's guts. Out fell my BlackBerry, as well as heaps of gold foil wrappers that feathered the security logbook. Ferrero Rochers for breakfast again? I budged my head towards the nauseatingly familiar voice and was walloped by a blast of Gucci cologne. Good morning to you too, Richard. I scooped up the week-old chocolate wrappers, and with a deft sleight of hand, they disappeared back into the depths of my bag. That's a great suit, sir. Is it Cavalli? Said Marco. Who are you? Said Richard. My name's... It was a rhetorical question. Foam was forming in the corner of Richard's mouth. I didn't really expect an answer. Marco's face soured. Poor kid. Nothing like being verbally bitch-slapped first thing on a Monday morning. Richard Pritchard was my former boss and current director of exhibits and programs. When he was recruited to head the division in which I'd worked for almost 15 years, it was as if a gnarly chunk of metal had been thrown into a finely tuned piece of machinery. I fled the toxic environment as quickly as possible and joined a newly created department called Museum Consulting Services. Richard slid back the finely woven sleeve of his jacket and eyed his Movado. Running right on time as usual, I see. I elevated onto my tiptoes and transfixed my gaze to Richard's forehead. If I were you, Richard, I'd request a refund for the Rogaine. I really don't think it's doing the job. Richard whipped up his hand, skimmed over the peach fuzz at the front of his skull, and immediately dropped his arm as if all life force had been drained from the limb. Blood slowly rose up his neck and began flushing his face from the chin up like red-tinted mercury rising up a thermometer. I dipped my chin and turned my face sufficiently to give Marco a discreet, "You owe me one" wink. He responded with a Cheshire grin. "You might be interested to know I'm meeting your boss and Brenda in 12 minutes and 56 seconds, Richard said, "and we're expecting you to take notes." "I'm aware of that," I said, sporting a saccharine smile. "You must be telepathic then, seeing as Stuart and I arranged this meeting minutes ago." "Please don't spit on me." With the palm of my hand, I swiped my cheek. "Stuart sent me a text." I grabbed my BlackBerry from the counter, slid my thumb over the dead battery indicator light, and waved it past Richard's face as though swatting a fly. "You'd better hurry." "Yes, I'd better." I swiped my card through the electronic reader, releasing the lock, and cycloned my way through the doors to the curatorial center, where the museum's offices and collections are housed. Richard bellowed something after me, but it was lost in the wake I left behind. With determined grace, I circumnavigated the first corner, ensuring I was out of Richard's sightline, then idled at Information Technology's door. Through the window, I spotted the overly made-up death metal vocalist, but there was no time to waste. If memory served me well, there was a chocolate bar stashed at my desk. There was still time to inhale it before the meeting with Richard. I sprinted through a maze of hallways like a thoroughbred bolting for the win, past carpentry and taxidermy, and galloped past the museum's own weapon of mass destruction, the daunting fumigation chamber used to exterminate insect stowaways catching rides on incoming artifacts and animal specimens. My high heels tap-tapped against the worn tile floor, mimicking the sound of machine gun fire. I rounded the next bend with an indelicate skid, almost colliding into a technician from the Egyptian department that was planted right in the middle of the narrow corridor. She was talking to the museum's chief librarian, Walter Pembroke. They hovered over a cart of small mummified creatures, probably cats or baby crocs. "Oh, sorry about that," I said, and swerved around the pair and barreled onwards. Parting my way through a last set of doors, I emerged into a public gallery lined with boulder-sized rocks, minerals, and gems to whose beauty I had long become desensitized. I came to a slow halt, panting as though I had just climbed the stairs of the CN Tower. A sign with the words Museum Consulting Services finally etched into a brass plaque hung on the stone wall at eye level. Home at last. I twisted the doorknob to the office with the tremble of a heroin junkie plummeting from a high. "Hey, Brenda." "Morning," she said, without releasing her stare from her computer monitor. I whipped off my soggy plaid trench and set my purse down beside the picture of my cat. Sweet old thing had died shortly after my second husband moved out. She had been as broken-hearted as I was. I flung open my desk drawer. Where was that chocolate bar? Crap. I had forgotten I had consumed it as an afternoon snack on Friday. Chocolate withdrawal was obviously affecting my memory. What the hell was I going to do? I couldn't go to a meeting with Richard in this fragile state and risk coming undone in front of him. "Have you talked to Stuart yet?" The usual crack of dawn briefing. Brenda typed so furiously I thought her keyboard was going to split in half. "Don't worry. Stuart loaded up at Heathrow with Thornton's, including your favorite chocolate-smothered toffee." "Oh, really?" "You know, he always does. You can pick it up when you see him. He called down a few minutes ago and said he needs you in his office pronto." I know. I ran into Richard on the way in, and he told me we're meeting. Said I was supposed to take notes, like suddenly I'm the secretary or something. Brenda swiveled around in her Herman Miller and peered at me. "You better do something with that hair of yours. Freakishly scary." I whipped a mirror out of my purse. Oh, give me a friggin' break. Between the rain and the mad dash from the staff entrance, I had a veritable vermin's lair on my head. I can't believe people I work with have seen me like this. Brenda hopped to her feet as though she'd been auto-ejected from her chair. "You're exhibiting symptoms of fuzzy brain. You haven't had any chocolate yet today, have you?" I thought I had a candy bar in my desk. "Just quaff the dew and I'll be right back." By the time I had stroked a comb through my unnaturally blonde hair and twisted it into a stylish updo worthy of a television commercial for a miracle hair clip, Brenda returned with a tin of Harrods cocoa and a spoon. She pried the metal lid off and scooped out a heaping portion of the posh British blend. "Go ahead. You know you've done worse." She forced the spoon into my hand, and I downed the dry cocoa like an obedient child. The instant the rich powder hit my tongue, I felt a warm, steady rush invade my body like an electrical current moving in slow motion towards my extremities. The body shudders subsided, and my hands steadied. When I returned to planet Earth, I stepped towards Brenda to give her a hug, but she backed away and raised her hand. Don't mistake my actions for some kind of team effort. Now get the hell out of here. She cracked a sliver of a smile, grabbed the backs of my shoulders, and sent me flying out the door. And don't you dare tell anyone about what I just did for you. It would ruin my reputation around here as a hard nose. I signed a confidentiality agreement when I was hired, didn't I? Right. Hey, do you know anything about those opals that were stolen from the museum? There's no time for chit-chat, do you? Oh, God, that was like decades ago. It happened during the staging of a special exhibition. The cops never caught the thief, but the opals turned up years later in a market in Hong Kong. Now get your ass upstairs. Brenda was right. There was no time to lose, and I broke the land speed record, hightailing it to Stuart's office in the executive suite on the 3rd floor. As I was about to tap on the doorframe, Stuart spotted me. Come in, come in. Stuart's prematurely silver beard and hair gave him a bit of a jolly Santa vibe. He was a gentle giant who probably could have been an awesome football player had it not been for the total lack of aggression in any cell of his body. Welcome back, Stuart. I suddenly sounded raspy. Damn. Some of the cocoa I had knocked back was lodged at the top of my esophagus. Thank you. It's good to have my land legs for a while. My eyes darted around the room. I see you've rotated your art again. Just how big is that African collection of yours? I counted on a few more coughs to clear my obstructed throat. According to that lovely wife of mine, too big. A giggle got trapped in my throat and came out as a cough. Are you all right? Shall I get you some water? Said Stuart. I gestured a no with my hand. Richard will be here any second, and I have a confession. I had a bit of an ugly encounter with him at the staff entrance. He brings out the worst in me, I said like a Janis Joplin sound-alike. He does have that effect on people, but you have to learn to separate the persona from the position. He is, after all, a senior manager. And this meeting we're about to have, if Richard ever makes an appearance, is at Carson's request. Odd, I thought. Rumor had it that the director and Richard were on the outs lately. Richard must have groveled his way back into Carson's good graces. Before I had a chance to speak further, a thundering knock startled both of us. Hello! Richard wriggled his thick form through the partially open doorway. I took the liberty of inviting someone else to join us. He forced the door wide open to expose Véronique Bouvier, Richard's embarrassingly inept sidekick and head of exhibits. She was the personification of a French poodle. Tall, with lanky limbs, she always wore a Nehru-colored suit jacket with faux fur cuffs. To this kooky wardrobe staple, she regularly paired an Hermès scarf snugly wrapped around her head, as if attempting to hold in her melting brain. Her mousy brown locks erupted into curves above the designer bandana. Bonjour, Véronique said. Is there anyone else hiding out there? Stuart said. Mais non, but where's Brenda? She's working to deadline on a study for a planetarium in Lisbon, said Stuart. But, spluttered Richard, I can't afford to pull her away from anything right now. Luckily, we have Colleen on our team. Richard and Véronique shifted their scrutiny towards me just as I declined my chin, hoping to dislodge the cocoa from my throat. Véronique spoke up. But we need someone with Brenda's. Véronique, let's get on with this. I'm meeting with the director in 15, and your tardiness has already cost us some time, Stuart said. Véronique withdrew into pout mode, and Richard seized the lead. Véronique and I have been approached by the San Francisco Museum of Art and Science to host Treasures of the Maya. The last venue on its tour pulled out at the 11th hour, and they're seeking another institution to round out the tour in this part of the continent. Aware that the museum had not presented a blockbuster of this magnitude for several years, my jaw almost unhinged. The sudden intake of air resulted in a silent burp, and a powdery brown vapor escaped, forming a small dark cloud in front of my face. I fanned the cocoa haze as unobtrusively as possible, but Stuart saw me from the corners of his eyes.